Welcome to Why the Long Face? Two old friends lifting the lid on mental health over a beer with author and psychiatrist Paul Keedwell and business consultant and so-called comedian Ollie Turnbull.
Well, hello and welcome to Why the Long Face, episode 5, season 3, the COVID years. I'm Oliver Turnbull and my co-host and partner and friend of 35 years is...
Dr. Paul Keedwell, hello.
How are you doing, Doctor? I'm missing you so badly.
Oh, you're so far away down in darkest Kent.
Yeah, and we're about to start week 8 of lockdown. We like to have a bit of a chat about where we are in the COVID crisis for when we come back to listen to these. And a lot of your predictions are coming true. Just for the record, we're about to start week 8. It's the 10th of May. And we're well past 30,000 deaths. So it's been, pretty harrowing.
Yeah, because we've added on, of course, the deaths from the residential care homes, and that has brought us right up. But then again, so has France added those deaths on. When everything comes out, I think we'll probably find that we're not separating much from France and Italy and Spain, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely not. I mean, we've got more deaths than all of those. And from my graphs that I obsess over, as you know, although you have had some fancy ones lately, we're still climbing more steeply. So it looks like we're over the worst, but it's grim numbers that would have thought been unthinkable just a few weeks ago. But
I think it's leading to a lot of frustration and anger. I feel that that's building because we know that we had a 2-week lead on Italy, actually, really, didn't we? We had time to perhaps do more to suppress the virus.
Correct. I mean, I think we've got to remember how unthinkable things felt back then.
That's true. I guess if we'd had a severe lockdown really early on, there's a risk it would have led to some rebellion.
It's just a horrible, horrible balance of civil liberties, public health, and the economy. Anyway, let's be upbeat because for the first time ever on our humble little podcast, and we have two doctors. And just to give you a clue, I'm not one of them. So we've found one.
Found another doctor.
She has many interests, most of which are very pertinent to what we want to talk about. So we're extremely, extremely pleased to welcome Dr. Lee David to Why the Long Face.
Welcome, Dr. Lee.
Hi there. Thank you very much. My name's Lee David. I'm a GP and I have a particular interest in mental health and in cognitive behavioural therapy. And I'm director of an organisation called 10-Minute CBT. I try and teach little bite-sized pieces so that other GPs can use it in their consultations, their 10-minute consultations.
That's great. And I think what caught my eye was that you had prepared a package specifically, I think, for adolescents.
I have a real interest in working with adolescents, both as a GP and as a CBT therapist. And with a colleague, we felt we just wanted to develop something to support young people who are being so affected by lockdown, their worlds being turned upside down. So we created a brief 10-minute CBT video package that covers some of the brief skills in understanding different emotional reactions and some strategies known as Face COVID about how young people might cope with some of the things that they're facing.
So Face COVID is an acronym.
It was developed originally by Russ Harris, who's an Australian psychologist, and he developed a model called Face COVID, and we just simplified it a little bit with his permission and just brought it down to 4 different steps. And it's just 4 basic sort of processes that you can go through to help you cope under this kind of extreme conditions.
Which spell out the name Face, I'm guessing.
Yes. Shall I quickly run through the 4 steps?
Definitely.
I'm not the quickest, but I got that.
I was wondering what on earth you were talking about. Face? Oh, I get it.
So the 4 steps are FACE, FACE. So F is focus on what you can control rather than what's outside your control. Then A is acknowledge what's happening inside. So it's just recognizing and maybe giving a name to the thoughts and feelings and body reactions that we're having. And then C is commit to a plan. So it means taking action and making decisions, choosing what behaviours we want to do and are likely to help us. And then E is engage with your values. And values is about what do I care about as a person? And for young people, that's really important. And finding what they're interested in, what motivates them, and then choosing some actions that are in line with that. And that can be a really powerful way of kind of coping with some of the emotional reactions, such as boredom.
It's probably a good lesson for adults too, because a lot of us have probably, with busy jobs and things like that, forgotten what to engage with when we've got extra free time. But it's great because we sort of touched on focus on what you can control. We've talked a lot about control and how COVID makes you feel out of control. So that's actually quite profound, I think, the first one. Acceptance is a sort of mindfulness thing, isn't it, Ol?
Yeah.
Being aware of all the things that's going around in our sensorium, but also internally, how we're feeling inside.
And how it's normal. Yeah, absolutely right. Remember when we talked to Imogen as well, who has who was on our last podcast about extreme reactions to stress. And I think this acknowledgement thing is very important, because not only you can say, yes, this is happening and this is horrible, but also it's in a sense a normal reaction to stress,
and other people are having it too.
Yeah.
But what's really new, I love this commit, because actually it's all very well to understand the theory, but then you've actually got to put it into practice. And it's great you've kept it nice and simple. 4 steps for, I can imagine adolescents engaging with that.
Definitely. And I mean, when I ran a quick poll to see, what are the issues that that adolescents are facing at the moment. And I should add that I'm a parent as well. So I have 2 sort of younger children. My children are 11 and 8. And so I'm also coping both as a parent, as a homeschooler, and then trying to manage the emotional reactions of some slightly younger children. So really covering the whole spectrum of different age children. Now, what was coming back is that the 3 big emotional reactions that parents are reporting are, there's boredom was number 1, which in a way could be allied with kind of low mood if you get bored long enough. A bit of boredom people are very positive about, aren't they? There's always like, oh yes, let them be bored. But I think if it carries on and on and on, there's a risk that it kind of drops down into lethargy and kind of inactivity, and then possibly even depression. And then there's loneliness, and that kind of disconnect from the social and the world, which is a huge impact. And so those were the biggest 2 that came through. And then the anxiety was the third one. There's a lot of anxiety, I think, and that's, I think, in adults and young people.
There's a sort of assumption that young people are perfectly fine to be having social engagements over the internet, through various social media, but actually they are really missing face-to-face contact, it seems.
I think it's fascinating, and it really confirms for me the fact that as humans we still have this social need for human connection, and how that is absolutely essential part of well-being is eye contact. And it might just be as you pop to the shop and making eye contact and smiling, and actually that's incredibly powerful in terms of feeling connected to the world.
It's a really odd thing. I went out to B&Q, perfectly legitimate, just in case we have government officials listening, watching. Do you know what the thing I missed, or I didn't realize I missed, was just looking at people's faces. It was just me connecting with other human beings. And I was oh yeah, there are loads of different other types of humans.
How did everybody else react to you staring at them, though?
I have to say badly, and in some cases violently. And it was the fact that the 2 meter rule existed that stopped me getting quite a nasty beating, I reckon.
That was been tricky when you were queuing to pay for your essential pot plant.
Why are you looking at me like that? I'm just enjoying your face. Wait till the lockdown is over, he said. So, Lee, what I know about CBT is that it's very good at getting people to look at their thought processes, the negative ones particularly, and how it affects their emotional and therefore psychological well-being. A, have I got that roughly right? And B, where's the use of that in this particular COVID context for you?
Face COVID context.
Well, yes, you have. Yes, you have got that right. However, the interesting thing is a lot of people, when they think about CBT, they think about thoughts and, changing thoughts and maybe looking for negative thought patterns. And actually what I found with my kind of brief approach to CBT is that changing thoughts is really hard. And so I would look at a kind of a model of breaking things down into thinking. So, what thoughts I have, what emotions I have, what's the emotional experience, what's happening in the body, so the physical symptoms that might be happening, and then my behavior, what I do. So we have these kind of 4 areas, which are sometimes called a kind of hot cross bun, and then what's going on in the environment around. And actually of those 5 areas, it's really only the behavior that we've got easy control over. It's really hard to control whether we have a negative thought or not, or whether we have a difficult feeling, whether we feel low or anxious. And some of the things we do to try not to feel anxious, such as, I don't know, seeking lots of reassurance, constantly looking stuff up on the internet, it makes you feel worse. And so actually it's, for me, a lot of it's about choosing the behavior, which comes back to that kind of face model, the committing to action and then engaging with your values and just doing stuff that's helpful and that makes you feel like your life's got some meaning. And for me, that's actually much more important than whether you've got a negative thought or not.
So it's focusing on the downstream effects of your thoughts, the behaviour, because there's the intermediary step of the emotion and then there's the behaviour.
Exactly. And I feel, we can recognize, we need to acknowledge how we're feeling. I mean, for example, some people are feeling this great sense of loss, a grief reaction at not being able to go out in the world. And we need to acknowledge that that's there. It's not about not recognizing it, but actually how we then respond to it comes back to our behavior. And that's the bit that we have got more control over. That's back to the F for the focus on what you can control, which is our behavior.
And what are the negative behaviours you see a lot in adolescence during lockdown, do you think?
Well, I think there's a mixture of things. So, and it will depend on our, the individual. But some things there may be a tendency to retreat into too much. So life's about balance. And, for example, technology is amazing, and the computer games and all of those things are fantastic ways to pass the time, and it's much better than just having nothing to do. But if you get so pulled in that it's almost taking you out of the real world, or you're not connecting with your family, then it's becoming problematic. So certainly for some people, overuse of computers, of gaming, getting out of a routine can be a problem. And for others, it might be too much checking. So there's too much kind of worrying about perhaps the virus or other things. And so there's a constant kind of reassurance seeking or looking up information on the internet. And that's, or, watching the news and getting too caught up in that. And again, that's just a really unhelpful kind of pattern because it makes you feel more anxious.
So, what do you tell your patients, Lee? Is it a case of getting them to stop doing some actions and start doing others as part of the commit?
Definitely. And it's about, and the great thing is, and if you come to the E of the values, I don't choose, especially with young people, because they have far better idea what they should be doing than me. I'm an old fogey compared to them. I've got no idea what they should be spending their time doing. And that isn't my role to tell people how to spend their time. But equally, to say, what do you care about? And actually, that's the thing that doesn't always happen with young people. They're not stopping and thinking, who do I want to be? What do I want to stand for? What actually matters to me as a human being on the face of this earth? And then setting some really tiny, I call them micro goals or micro steps, so that they're not overwhelming. Because again, you can think, oh, I should do this, but it's too hard, or I'd love to get around to that, but it's just too difficult. And so you have to set steps that are absolutely tiny, so small, in fact, that you feel like they're not going to make any difference. But the aim is not to fix a problem with changing the behaviour, it's to start to recognise that we've got choice. So it doesn't actually matter what happens, and it doesn't matter if it's a good change or a bad one. It's actually learning to try new stuff and being a bit more willing to kind of experiment with how we react in the world.
So yeah, if you want to be a rock star, you might just download an app on how to learn how to play the guitar or something like that. It'll be that would be a starting point.
Exactly. If you're someone, I mean, it's fascinating. Some people, their value is they've always wanted to play the guitar, and so actually this lockdown is a fantastic opportunity to think, you know what, and one of my nephews is doing that and he's loving it. He's been really enjoying practicing. And for other people, they would look at that and think, oh, I can't do that, this is just too stressful, why do I want to do that? And so it becomes a negative. And so what's really important is to say, what is it for you? Is as a parent, for example, if I pull myself in, um, you have to choose what you want to stand for. So something that I'm not capable of doing, unfortunately, I wish I was, is doing loads of amazing baking. I'd love to be someone who could make sourdough loaves and bake these fantastic cakes and creations and put the photos on Facebook, and everyone would be like saying, oh, what a great baker. I just can't do that. That's just outside my stress levels. And I've just had to accept that. And same goes for creative kind of artistic stuff. I'd love to be able to do it, but it's just, I have to pick a few small things that we can do as a family. So with my younger kids, exercise is something that really matters to me. So we try and get a bit of exercise in, bite size, but I try and get it in most days. And they like music, so we do a bit of music practice, and I try and get them to do maybe 10 minutes of their schoolwork, maybe a bit of maths. And that's kind of it. And so those are the things that I felt I can handle, that I feel like I can look back and think, yeah, I care about those. And the stuff like the baking or for other people, that'll be their big thing, and they'll come out with these creative masterpieces.
That's not engaging with your particular skill set, is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
So build on your strengths.
With what energy I've got in this limited time, you've got to choose what you can manage. And I was talking to some other parents quite recently, and there's a huge thing for parent guilt, and you're looking on Facebook and these kids are doing, how much schoolwork are they getting done, and how much this and how much that, and there's this terrible sense of, and that's the issue with social media, is there's a huge judgment. I think people have a tendency to judge themselves, and it's so easy on social media to see what other people are doing and feel like you're not meeting the standard.
We have friends who are having pizza masterclasses, which I don't get involved in.
Well, funny enough, we had one on pasta, Paul, and it was actually really good, and it had a lovely byproduct that my son learned how to make delicious fresh pasta. So I not only did I not have to get involved, I now get fresh pasta cooked for me. So pluses and minuses. But I think this is fascinating stuff. I like the way that you. It seemed to me when I first heard about 10-minute CBT, I thought, well, that's almost impossible. But I see now, I started to understand how you've boiled down, if you like, the essence to something that can help maybe people who don't have a long time to go through a large scale piece of therapy. And I was wondering, could you give us some examples, maybe some bite-sized pieces of advice, if you like, of these kind of, what did you call them, micro steps or micro things that have been successful, even if they sound quite simple and trite, that things have got people back on the right track?
Definitely. So if we think about boredom and the spectrum of boredom, which if it leads to kind of lethargy and giving up, can get you quite low and might even lead to people getting depressed. And I think that is on that kind of spectrum of kind of being a bit sort of stuck,
retreating to their rooms and just on the laptop the whole time, or on their games console the whole time.
Reducing social interaction even further, perhaps within their families, reducing the eye contact that we were talking about earlier, and just kind of sinking into a kind of a bubble of just computer, but not all the rest of it. And so for that, there's a kind of vicious cycle where you kind of start thinking negatively, you feel more fatigued, and then your behaviour is to do less. And your thinking is quite demoralised, and what's the point? And it kind of becomes this very negative, I can't do anything, and people have those negative thoughts, and that's the cycle so think negatively and kind of doing less. And so for them, I would encourage these bite-sized behaviour. So behavioural activation is a form of CBT which has got evidence for depression. That's you don't even have to worry about the thoughts. You don't have to you just do more stuff. It's really easy.
Do more stuff.
You do more stuff.
and just make sure it's stuff that you have a little bit of an aptitude for already, maybe, or stuff you just know that you're going to enjoy, and that that is constructive,
Yeah.
is not passive.
Because that's the values bit, isn't it?
Yeah,
The
it
values
is.
bit. Because I guess they would just say, well, playing my computer games and having a goal to beat Fred, who lives down the road, is active. But you would counter that actually that's not going to. You're doing that because of the negative emotions you're feeling, the anxiety. You're using it as a distraction. It's not actually, in the long run, going to make you feel happy. In fact, quite the opposite. So do some stuff that's going to mean that you have to create something or interact with someone. Is that right? So you start. I can sort of see how that works.
I think there's a balance as well, and it's not to say don't ditch the computer, because if that's what they care about and actually that is their value, then that's a great thing to encourage. But it's all about the context for me. So, for example, watching TV, if a parent has a stressful day at work and they come home and they want to wind down and watch some TV as a relaxation, amazing. I mean, one of the things as lockdown that I advise is to kind of get some kind of family ritual or routine that bonds you. So with our family, with my two young kids and my husband, we take it in turns. We never did this. We were way too busy doing all these clubs, which I'm actually really grateful that we're not doing at the moment. But we take it in turns to choose a TV program that we watch every evening. So we have this family, we have dinner together, and then we go and sit, and everyone has a turn. So somebody chooses the program, and we're kind of cycling through different programs like from Doctor Who to Merlin and all sorts of stuff, and the kids are picking. And it's a really wonderful time that we're bonding. The kids really enjoy it. We're spending it as a family. So that, for me, although it's TV, has a lot of positives. That's creating a connection as a family.
Because you're watching it together. You're co-viewing.
Exactly. And it's a sort of limited amount of time. It's one episode. It doesn't. But if we spent all day doing nothing but TV, then that's when the balance comes out. So it's not to say any activity is bad, but it's how is it functioning in the context of all your life in general.
It's really strange. I've got a similar situation, Lee, as you. I've got two kids and my wife and in the house, and we are doing the same as you. We're constructing these rituals within our little society of 4 people, which are actually quite positive and quite nice. It's quite democratic. Everybody's cooking, everybody's clearing up. We have a different thing. We're far too different. My son studies film and my daughter's only 15, so our tastes in TV are too broad to ever bring together, really. But we arrange where someone's watching the TV and someone isn't, and when Charlie's with his girlfriend and stuff. And we've created our own little society, which I think, and I'd love your views, I think I'm going to sort of miss the togetherness and the little group that we've created. I think we're going to miss it post-COVID and look back on it quite positively, actually.
Maybe this is a lesson in living going forward, that we put more time aside for that sort of thing, for coming together as a family, because we have an obsession with achieving stuff, and that gets in the way of this important family time during normal times. Yeah,
I think you're onto something.
I think that's so true. I honestly think that's true for our family, and we spend so much time driving the kids to their activities and being taxi services, and actually not spending time together, all of us, just connecting. And I would definitely say that I will miss that when that, and that for us as a family has been quite a positive, that we have connected. I mean, one of the things I'm really fascinated about is this kind of thing of peer orientation in adolescence, where adolescents become more orientated towards their peer group than towards their family. And that can be problematic because your peer group are often not as supportive as your family environment, and it can lead to this disconnect between parents and their children. And actually, this is an opportunity. So a way of coping with the loneliness that young people are facing is actually to really strengthen the relationships within the family and use it as an opportunity to say, okay, there is a loss. It's genuine. We need to mourn that and recognize it. But actually, there's a gain too, because the relationship within the family possibly could be more important in some ways, or certainly, you don't want it to be less important than the peer relationships, because that's when peer groups can start to have an undue influence over young people, which is perhaps unhelpful. So really we could use
Yeah.
this as an opportunity to kind of grow our bonding within the family environment.
I think what really resonated with me was when you said it's about doing activities together. And I was thinking back to when I was being ferried to judo and back and things when I was young. I remember that they're far less salient to me than the times I spent with my father and then the other members of the family making pottery in the home. So actually, these times when I was slightly glib about the pizza masterclass, but Ollie's pasta making is actually probably going to be very salient for your son as he grows up. So actually, that's a really important part of your face COVID, doing more stuff with your family.
It's not about solving the problem, and we've talked about this before. One can be tempted when someone comes to you with a crisis to try to solve the problem, and this is one of those things that you can't really solve the problem because you can't cure COVID or ease the lockdown. But what you can do is take control, I think you're saying, particularly of your behaviours, because they think that you are control within your value system, i.e. what's important to you. I think the simplicity of that and the pragmatism of that is it resonates with me. And from what you're saying, it sounds like it works really well, particularly with the young people. I was wondering, in terms of parents, we've touched upon the competitive parenting, which is such a tedious part of the whole social media world.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, it's just dreadful. But I was wondering, in terms of the COVID lockdown and the stresses and the strains that some of your patients, the 12 to 19 age, are going through. What about the parents? How are they doing? How's it affecting them? How are you treating them?
Well, I think it's tough, isn't it? Because they're having to juggle, and it varies very much from different families about how work is, whether there's financial issues, whether they're having to try and homeschool, what the demands are from the school, whether they're reasonable or not. And there's such diversity. Some schools are setting ridiculous amounts of work, others just not doing anything at all. It seems so sort of variable, and parents are just there left trying to juggle everything and trying to have all these balls up in the air. And I think it can be exhausting. I'm hearing people saying I'm having to get up at 6 to get my work done for 2 hours before the kids, so that I can actually then do some homeschooling with them as well. So it's really can be very challenging.
Yeah.
Do you think parents are putting too much pressure on themselves, though, to do, because of this competitive parenting environment that's often there on social media, to actually do the perfect homeschooling, when in fact probably it's okay to be good enough, not be perfect.
I totally agree. My 8-year-old son, his concentration's not great, and he's got 38 children in his class at school. And when I went to parents' evening a few weeks before lockdown, I opened up his books. There was nothing in them. So, is he actually doing any work at all? I don't think he is. And so, actually, when we're at home, if I can just sit with him and do 10 or 15 minutes worth of concentrated stuff, that's probably more than he was doing in the classroom in an entire day in the school environment. So in some ways, you don't need to try and replicate how much they were doing at school, because this is not school. We're not teachers. We're not supposed to be teachers. We're just doing our best.
Yeah, that's all you can do. You can't replicate the school environment in the home.
And why we don't even need to, actually.
As you say, 30 minutes concentrated time with you might be worth 5 times that in a busy classroom.
And not only from the position of education and getting facts into the little chap's head in a nice way, spending time with mum. It's a wonderful thing. We've got a very similar thing in that my daughter is quite a slow learner. She's pretty bright, but she's a slow learner. And similar thingly, we're not getting much from the school. But when she's home, she's being tutored by the student who lives with us. And I did some tutoring with her in maths, which used to be the most terribly frustrating thing, because I love maths and she just doesn't get it. And suddenly the scales are falling from her eyes. Someone's spending quality time with her. I'm bonding with my lovely daughter, and she's actually learning maths. And I think we have this thing in our game called vanity metrics. And what it is things that sound like they're good, but actually aren't really measuring the right things. So just because maybe your boy is very well behaved and his attendance is great, and he never gets into trouble, and he hands his homework in on time, then that's a really good measure of how he's doing. When actually the real measure of it is how happy he is, and how much he's going in. And it sounds like you've got the real metrics right when you're educating him at home.
How much is sinking in? Yeah, how much they're engaging with the subject rather than just turning up.
No, I can really relate to that.
Yeah. I can imagine some pitfalls sometimes, though, where I remember my mum did some home tutoring for me in preparation for A-level maths, and I remember us crossing swords a few times. But I suppose that's natural, and I can see that happening quite a lot.
Well, with you, certainly.
Yeah, it was a cocky young thing. Yeah, that's true.
I know better, Mum.
Yeah. No, I just don't get it, Mum. Why are you doing it this way? Yeah.
God. Oh, I can just imagine.
Yeah, what a pain in the arse.
But some children won't want to, you know. I mean, I've got a friend and their son refuses point blank to do any kind of schoolwork at home at all. He just doesn't want to. He's been building a shed with his dad, and actually there's a big value in that too. So, it's not to say, oh, well, if you give them the time, it's all going to be easy, because it definitely isn't. So it's about thinking what you can do and where you're at as a family, and just trying to work on something that gives you some sense of, well, this is actually moving us in a positive direction.
It's just a pragmatic solution. I can't get him to engage with maths, so I'll get him to build a shed with me instead, and the maths will come later, and trying to relax about the whole thing.
And so I'm writing a book on anxiety disorders, and then another book coming up later this year on young people, which will include many of the skills we've been talking about, these kind of bite-sized steps about kind of coping with feelings and how to move life forwards, that kind of pragmatic, quite behavioural approach to that.
And if they want to, after this, listening to this podcast, they want to find out more, they can go to 10minutescbt.co.uk, and I think there's some free content there, isn't there? And video, and there's some practice sessions and things like that. And obviously it takes longer than 10 minutes to go through the program, but it looks very comprehensive.
I got my first certificate, Doctor. I haven't told Paul this yet, but I was very pleased. So I went through the first course, and I was telling Lee that she's reminds me of my first GP when I was a kid, in that she sort of has the authority but the warmth as well, which is sometimes you get one with the GP and not the other. But I think with Dr. David you get both. And so I went through my course and I got a certificate coming through an email.
Well, you do love a certificate.
I love a certificate, and my first one since my degree, which was probably more valuable.
Which is a less impressive certificate.
We probably don't need to go into that, I guess. Yeah. But anyway, for people who like certificates, you get a certificate.
Yeah, so there's two courses. There's two free courses. There's one which is aimed at health professionals, which is a brief kind of overview, supporting health professionals through their own stresses. As you know, it's a challenging time at the moment to be a health professional. So I wanted to just develop some free sort of well-being, mental health resources to just support NHS and other key workers through this difficult time. And then we've got another free course that's called 10-Minute Steps to Surviving Lockdown, and that's aimed at young people and their families. And I wouldn't necessarily say stick the young person in front of the video and get them to watch it on their own. I think in many ways, if you can watch it with them and talk about it, that's going to be far more powerful and far more useful than it's another video thing where they just sit on their own and kind of absorb it. I think it's discussing how does it relate to them, what might they take away from it, and maybe trying to pick some tiny micro kind of things out of, what makes sense, which one do you want to work on?
Yeah, and you can answer their questions as you go as well.
Cool.
Yeah, nice. I was going to say I should probably do the first one, because doctors are the worst patients, aren't they? And
oh, he's terrible. He's terrible, Lee. He's awful. He never looks after himself. Do you remember once you came around and you were catastrophizing without even knowing it? The psychiatrist catastrophizing. I remember saying, Dr. Keeler, what are you doing? And you said, what? I'm not doing anything. The guy didn't bring me back. He obviously thinks I'm an idiot.
Catastrophizing.
I was catastrophizing. I've got is there anything in what you do? I wonder if CBT, and maybe 10-minute CBT, has an application in people who are not ill, they're not depressed, they're not anxious, but there's something missing in their lives. As in, I'm doing quotes, finger quotes, normal psychologically. But
It works brilliantly on radio and podcasting.
thank you.
I would say I don't know anyone who's got perfect mental health. I know I haven't, and certainly not during lockdown. That Paul's mentioned about Paul Gilbert before, and the kind of compassion focused approach. And I think just being a bit kinder to ourselves and just being a bit more accepting. That, do you
Hallelujah.
know what? I am not perfect, and I'm okay. And do you know what? I can live with it. I messed up, so maybe I got frustrated. Maybe I may have struggled a bit. We did a bike ride today, and I may have got a bit frustrated because nobody was coming on time, and I knew I had to get back. So time frame, I was a bit sort of stressy about what time we were going to go. And I may have got a bit irritable about the fact that everyone was dragging their heels, going to the toilet, not getting their bikes, couldn't find their, helmets. And I was just, so I may have got a bit grumpy as we were leaving. And but I think the key is that we have to forgive ourselves for that, because that's the message is, yeah, I did, and I'll apologise for it later. And if I may have snapped at one or two people in the family, so I'll have to go back and say, I'm sorry about that. But equally, I need to forgive myself and be kind to myself and accept I'm doing the best that I can.
Yes. Don't be wrapped up in guilt about it. Yeah, you're going through stress just like everybody else. And when other people are irritable and snap at you, you cut them some slack because you understand.
Exactly.
It's just harder to cut yourself some slack sometimes. I think that's absolutely the crux of a lot of mental health problems is we are too hard on ourselves.
We are, and I much prefer self-compassion to self-esteem, which is about how good am I at this, and can I rate myself highly. But actually the time you need compassion is the times that you're not achieving what you want, where you haven't really done, where things haven't gone to plan, where things have gone wrong. But we still need to be kind to ourselves and kind of accept that that's still being human, that we mess up, and that's okay.
I would also add that one of the most important causes of depression is setting yourself up to fail. So, okay, things have not gone to plan, but that's because I had completely unrealistic expectations of where I should be right now. On the route towards my goal, whatever that goal may be, to be college professor, or to learn to play Stairway to Heaven. Doesn't matter. You need to be realistic and cut yourself some slack and give yourself a bit more time to achieve these things, or abandon them altogether. As we had a previous guest who was saying, "Oh gosh, why do people obsess about having to be able to achieve some amazing goal during the lockdown?" Actually, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should spend that time to be kind to yourself, do things that you enjoy. I think you said engage with your values, but engage with what you are on the planet to do.
Yeah.
But very often our time is filled with noise. It's filled with stuff that we feel we should do because of what we read or hear or what our peer group says. No, spend the time to engage with what makes your heart sing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's valuable time.
I think that's completely true. And I had a really interesting conversation with a neighbour on Friday, which was VE Day. And we did some socially distanced kind of, activities where we could still talk to people at a distance. And, I was talking to another parent who was talking about the issue of guilt, and saying that what she noticed was that the more guilty she felt about things, the worse she was behaving, and the more she'd actually do things that she felt bad about. And it's almost like that vicious cycle where you feel bad, and so then you do something else to just kind of cover up the bad feeling, and it would lead to this vicious cycle where she would end up saying things. And she said she described this observing herself saying stuff, and she's like, why are you saying that to your, why you the things that come out of your mouth are and I said, I have the same experience. You just watch yourself saying stuff that you don't want to be doing, and the worse you feel, the more likely you are to do it. So that's when cutting yourself some slack really matters, because actually if you can forgive yourself, that's when you can then break the cycle and stop kind of hooking into doing the negative stuff that's, you can have a breather.
Otherwise, I'm going to get angry and I'm going to lash out.
Is that what they call a metacognition, Paul, that you were talking about before, where you sort of catch yourself thinking and you go,
I think that's
I'm
right,
acting in a weird way and I'm watching myself acting in a weird way kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the core of CBT has always been about that, having more awareness of your thoughts and being able to put those thoughts in a certain bracket. But I think metacognition is the latest sort of revolution in CBT, and it's connected to mindfulness. It's where you're saying, okay, I'm having those thoughts, but I'm not going to beat myself up for having those thoughts. My new thought is I'm not going to beat myself up about having that thought.
I like it. I mean, I think you should beat yourself up slightly more, of course. But
absolutely fair comment. Yeah, I'm an insufferable human being sometimes. Absolutely. To which he says, sometimes.
I'm going to just get to edit that little bit out and just have it playing over and over. Mm-hmm. I haven't Lee and Paul actually, but my job is a lot more tedious than both of your jobs, but I quite like it.
Well, that's what matters. You're engaging with your values.
Well, exactly. And so you've taught me. I'm engaging. So there we are. I don't feel bad about not really helping society like you guys do.
No, why are you apologising for your job being dull? Because it's got a reputation of being dull, whereas you don't find it dull.
I think we've had a great session today. We've made real progress today.
Just the rest of us.
Yeah. So we're looking at the moment. So we look at technology, basically digital technology, and how it can help in business. And we are on the cusp of a revolution in life sciences and healthcare. We'll listen to this podcast in 5 years' time and go, golly, he was so prophetic. And part of that, of course, is telemedicine. And what I'd be very interested in both your views, but we'll start with Lee, is where remotely assessing someone, particularly for potentially a psychological problem, where you're obviously looking for non-verbal cues, etc. How effective is it to do that remotely in these times and the times that I am convinced
I think it's
now?
As people get more familiar with it, it's becoming easier. And I think as the technology flows to kind of mimic some of the things that happen in real life, that makes a difference as well. So having a good camera does make a difference, having that really good visual connection where you can actually have that sense of eye contact. I do think that makes a really big difference. So having said that, there's some evidence that for some people, especially if you have, for example, social anxiety, that can actually be problematic. So taking that away can actually facilitate therapy. So it's really about working about what works for a particular individual, because some people get so anxious when they think people are watching them that it actually stops them from being able to engage in therapy. So for them, written CBT via the computer can be really powerful.
Written as in like correspondence? Or
So doing a mixture of between writing on the keyboard as well as so if someone has a lot of social anxiety that actually makes it hard for them to engage in conversation with people, then actually that can take away a layer of anxiety that enables them to actually participate. So I think it is working out what a particular individual needs. But most people, I think, do better with a decent video link and some way. I mean, I like writing stuff down and drawing pictures quite a bit. So finding a way to mimic that on the computer makes a difference as well.
I mean, we're working with software at the moment, which basically allows you to have a whiteboard in front of you and you can have the face in the corner. And it's only recently that we've been able to run professional, 12, 15 participant workshops, and I've run workshops for years, and doing it digitally with a big screen with a whiteboard where everybody can draw and move post-its around and group things together. It's unbelievable, and it works incredibly. It actually works better sometimes than it does in a real face-to-face workshop. And it's obviously a hell of a lot greener because people aren't having to travel. You're not having to print out loads of stuff and stick it on the wall. I'm very, very optimistic about these kind of interactions and their ability to be done digitally. I never really considered before how it might be an advantage to be able to cut off the video camera and to communicate with the patient in different ways at the same time.
I can see how that whiteboard technology would possibly be useful in group CBT. At least at the beginning, the work around anxiety management is whiteboard stuff. It's about the inciting incident and the thought that triggers, and then the emotion, and then the behaviour in that sort of sequence, and learning about that and learning about physiology. Psychoeducation, I guess I can see that working for that. But I do have reservations. I feel that it is quite important for most people to have a face-to-face relationship, at least to start with, to build trust.
Even someone with your face?
Even someone with my face, yeah.
I'm surprised.
Because, it's all about bedside manner.
I think you're right, actually. In establishing a relationship, which has got to be as close as a patient physician, but even in business, there's nothing like
Pressing the flesh.
having a coffee, having a bit of a joke, really reading the body language as to how you're going to develop this relationship. But I also think once you've established that,
then you can move on to
Yeah, that's right. You sort of have a boost of that intimacy, if you like, by meeting face to face, and that boost kind of runs through the next interactions, be they on video conference and or even telephone call, or even email. Actually, once you know someone really well, an email has much more richness to it, and I can see that in the clinical setting. But I take your point actually in your reservations, because what you do is so built on two human beings trying to understand each other.
Yeah, it's a relationship like no other, really. But at the same time, I understand that Lee's work is going to be extremely valuable for some people as well.
I mean, I think it has been fascinating what it has happened in general practice over the last, 6 weeks or so, in terms of moving to video consulting and how quickly that's happened. And I think it's going to revolutionise primary care and how it's delivered. But I don't think anyone would ever stand up and say, yes, we want it to be purely digital. I think it will add an option which has got convenience. It's got, for some people, for various reasons, who it's difficult for them to travel, which could be physical reasons. There's all kinds of reasons why it might be difficult. And so it's going to add on a layer of potential, which I think can only be a good thing. But I think to have it at the moment, we're just that's all is available. I'm missing seeing people face to face too.
I think it's a very, very valuable resource for those who perhaps find it very difficult to go and to make that first consultation, actually. I was just thinking about it then. About initiating the relationship, for some people, might be better over video link or even just a phone call, and then the next step might be face-to-face.
We talk about frictionless or reducing the friction of any particular process. In other words, making it as easy as possible. And I'm just wondering if someone's completely on their last... completely desperate. Sometimes the friction of being able to create a physical appointment and having to get public transport there is just too much for them to face.
It's the hassle, and you're getting over that initial fear of speaking to someone, perhaps by just having that little extra bit of remoteness might actually, as you said, be particularly useful for someone with social anxiety. But I think often people with depression as well, because they tend to be very socially withdrawn, because they do experience a lot of social anxiety, actually.
Exactly.
This is often something that's not properly recognised. So I mean, maybe I'm just being old-fashioned, and maybe this is the future. I think probably a mixture of the two, face-to-face and video link, and, as you say, email, phone calls, depending on the person and the context.
I mean, I hope we're going to be more creative, and actually we have a system that's a bit rigid in some ways. This is how it's done. But I think the reality is that for most people, having a mixture of different ways of being able to connect and mixing up a bit of face-to-face, a bit of email, a bit of, of video is likely to be their optimal pathway. And if we can try and flex our systems so they're not quite so rigid. And I do appreciate that's not necessarily easy in a GP surgery or a hospital system. But actually, if we are able to learn from this, that, there are more varied ways to be able to connect. I mean, my 89-year-old mum has been having these, telephone consultations with consultants at home. And for her to get to the hospital was an absolute nightmare. So really, it's much better for her to have those. So
because actually a health service is only as good as how accessible it is. If your nearest clinic's 2 bus rides away, it's not actually fit for purpose, you could argue.
This is the friction. So the frictionless you can make the interaction with the system, the better. It's here to stay. I'm 100% convinced, and my career relies on it. So I keep telling myself this. So I wonder, is it time for me to try and do a summary of...
Unless you had anything to add, Lee, on how you manage your little ones, because we talk quite a lot about the adolescents.
So exercise, I think I'm going to come back to, and everyone does groan a bit when you say exercise, because, it's this, but I really feel it's massively important for well-being. And what I try and do is I do it with them so that it becomes something that we do back to that family connection. So I try and find, so we do the Joe Wicks PE with Joe every other day. And I drag myself up and do it as well. And I can't hardly walk after doing some of his lunges.
I know, I've been doing that. It is very lunge heavy, and it starts off easy, so you're in a false sense of security there for a while, and then he says, right, now we're going to really ramp things up. Oh my God.
And I mean, I couldn't get up after the first day of doing it. I couldn't get up off the dinner, off the dining chair. I was like, "Oh, this is happening." But we did it. We had, we tried to laugh, tried to make it as silly as possible, and then we go out, we do a little bit of walking and jogging together. Again, I try and go with them. And if we have to walk, so again, I try and do it, but I set the boundaries as being realistic. So if we're too tired for running, then we'll walk. If we can't manage it, then we'll take it down a notch. But getting out there is what really matters. And you do see a few people, we socially distance. We're very lucky. We live near quite a wide kind of bridle path, so that you can keep to one side and get round people. But just saying good morning to people, I think there's a real value in that as well. So having a routine, having some structure, picking the things that we can do that I think are important and that they agree, and that not going too crazy about it, not setting these goals of having to do hours of maths or whatever, just doing 5 or 10 minutes and just thinking, okay, I've done something, great. And then they kind of have a reward in the afternoon where they do a bit more, going on their electronics or watching a TV program. And so the days actually surprisingly go quite quickly. It's amazing.
Good.
And having that family time, I think, does make a difference that we look forward to at the end of the day.
And that just reduces the incidence of irritability, defiant behaviour, all that sort of thing that the younger kids can exhibit, I guess, at these times.
I think so, because it's like special time, where we used to have to do this thing of special time, but actually now we don't really need
special
to.
time all the time.
Doing a little bit more time together. Yeah. And so we don't need to label it. It's just time together.
Time together. And I think that's a nice fitting place to stop and invite Oliver to give us one of his exemplary summaries.
Exemplary. Well, the irony of this one is that it's a summary of a summary, really. So it's 10-minute CBT summarized. So it's now 1 minute CBT, which is
a meta summary.
It's a meta summary. It's 1 minute CBT, which is something that I am now going to copyright. I am going to write a book about, and it's CBT in 1 minute. So it's the face.
How do you feel about that, Lee?
Her husband's a lawyer. So it's the face that I recognize, the face that I go back to. This focus, which is a little bit like our Pilgrim's Prayer that we always talk about, Paul, about having the fortitude to deal with the things that you can't change, the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference, and the acknowledge and the giving it a name. So this has happened, and I'm feeling like this about it. And actually, that's perfectly natural and cool, and this is what it is. But then we get into the commit and the take action, and a Western idea of taking action is, right, I'm going to run 3 marathons by Christmas, but you don't necessarily mean that. You mean do anything positive that is within your value system. In other words, something that you care about.
Even if it's just a small step, just commit to it.
Yeah.
And the final one is engage with your values, right?
Exactly right.
For engagement.
Yeah, we've been writing notes. So Lee, where can people find you in terms of your book, in terms of gaining one of your coveted certificates?
For the parents who want to find out a bit more about Face COVID,
they can go to the 10-minute CBT website and they can click on the online learning tab, and then there's a free course there that you can register for that takes you through a number of sort of less than 5 to sort of 7-minute videos looking at different topics like feeling low, or grief, or anxiety, or sleep is another one that's quite popular, about how to sort of, have a good sleep.
Yeah, because that's another symptom of stress. But also there's some specific strategies, aren't there, like dropping the anchor for dealing with extreme emotions and so on. It's great. I recommend it, and you get a certificate, don't you all? You
get a certificate, which is on the wall next to my 25 meters with armbands, which I actually only achieved last year.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Well, you've got some extra buoyancy, though, haven't you, these days? Not sure the armbands were all that necessary. Thank you very much, Lee, for coming on. Great insights. And I love your acronym. Everyone loves a good acronym.
It works as well. It's not one where you've got an extra letter that you can't make any use of, like face G or something like that. It's nice. We love that.
Please do get in touch with us right through the usual channels, ytlf.com or YTLF on Facebook. That's WHYTLF. Oliver?
Yeah, that's just about it. And of course, we're on Spotify, and we're on Deezer, and we're on Google, and we're on iTunes. Of course we are. Hardly need to say it. Lee, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. As usual, I've learned lots. Nice to see two professionals agreeing so wholeheartedly on things, and we'll be in touch, and very much good luck with your new book.
Yes.
And hopefully our paths will cross again.
Yeah. Bye for now.
Bye.